If you're learning Arabic as a second language, but you want to teach it to your children, what should you do? So I've been learning Arabic as a second language now for a few years. And one of the goals that I have while I'm learning Arabic as a second language is I also want to teach my children this language. So most people, I think, or there are many people who are in this situation. And for example, coming from a South Asian background, in the first 20 years of my life, the only interaction I had with Arabic, or with the Arabic language, is that I learned to read the Quran. And I think many Muslim people from a non-Arab background are in this situation, or even if they're from an Arab background, they may learn to understand the dialect that they come from the region they come from, but they don't actually understand standard Arabic, and they're not able to interact with certain media like the news or like the Quran or like, for example, the Islamic tradition to the same extent that they maybe want to. Now, that's a better problem to have than the one I have coming from a South Asian background, speaking the Urdu language as a second language at home, or at least being able to understand it. But now at this point, I'm learning the Arabic language as a second language, but I want to teach it to my children. What do I do? Okay, so my feedback would be, if you're in this situation, or in the long term, if you want to teach Arabic to your children as a second language, then you have to learn to give them a connection with the language, right? Before you learn them, before you teach them to read and to write the language. And this is feedback that I just heard on a video today from a sister who runs an institute in the Toronto region, to help children learn the Arabic language. And this is, I think, a very critical piece of advice, because for generations now, really, I think we've been doing it wrong, and we've been doing our children a disservice, especially if we're trying to help them have a connection with the Quran. If we're trying to help them have a connection with the Islamic tradition, we should first help them to learn the language like they would any other language. And then from there, once they have a connection to the language, once they have developed a basic understanding of the language, we can start to focus more on reading and writing. And the way to do that, my feedback would be, how do you do that then? The question might be. So the answer to that is, you would help them learn the language similar ways to what you did as a kid growing up. And I think for me, even someone who I still don't have an advanced level in the Arabic language, I can't have a very advanced conversation with someone. But what I can do is I can sit down with my children and I can turn on a cartoon, and through cartoons, and I think I've heard it from a number of people that who live in North America, who have raised their children to try to help them understand Arabic. They've said cartoons are very helpful, and so you can find these cartoons online. Netflix has, Green Eggs and Ham is one that these days I'm watching. There's a Magic School Bus on Netflix that you can put on for your children, and it has the Arabic language, and that's something that you can incorporate into your own study regime, right? So when you're learning the language, and to ensure you don't have just a very shallow understanding of the language, try to go through the same content that you would want to take your children through, right? So that's the reason why, for example, for myself, I'm investing in books at this stage that I want to read with my children, whether it's picture books, whether it's, I have I have Harry Potter in Arabic, which maybe one day my kids will get to, if inshallah. So those are the things I would say. Number one, focus on having your children watch Arabic cartoons. And if, let's say, you're at a point where you already have kids and you don't understand the language, but yet you want your kids to learn the language, I would still say it's probably a good idea to have them listen to the cartoons, because kids have so much more time than we do. And just by having that exposure to the language, I think they will develop something out of it. And if you do it with them, so then inshallah you're going to improve your language, and they're going to improve their own language with you. In closing, I can say for myself, as a South Asian, I understand Hindi and Urdu primarily because I remember on Sunday mornings, on Channel 14 where I live, every weekend there was a Bollywood movie that was on, and with English subtitles. And I primarily understand the Urdu or Hindi language because I used to listen to those movies with the subtitles, right? And so the same way, you can incorporate the same sort of learning strategy with your own children. And so I hope this feedback is helpful for you, and I hope you can implement it giving your children the opportunity to learn the Arabic language, because my vision, and one of the things that I want to contribute towards, is helping the community of Muslims to teach their children the Arabic language in a more holistic way, where they're not just reading a text that they have no clue what it means, but rather first they learn to understand it, and then they learn to read it, and to to memorize it, and to be balanced in that approach, rather than just learning something without any understanding. So I hope that you found this advice useful, and if you have any tips, actually, please do share in the comments on how we can help teach our children the Arabic language. Jazakumullah khairan.